to my channel Made by Cath. Thank you so much for joining me today. So in today's vlog I'm going to be talking all about a coat review, and it's this coat pattern here that I'm going to be talking about. It's the Oslo coat pattern by Tessuti. And this is my first fully lined coat pattern I've made, and I found it a really interesting learning process. And I found along the way of making this coat, I picked up a lot of hints and tips that I'd like to share with you. So in my vlog I'm going to be talking all about this coat and coat making in general. I'm going to be talking about fabrics, adjustments I made, how I found the pattern, particular tips I have for tools I used. So I'm hoping it'll be useful if you're thinking of making your first line coat yourself, or just interesting to find out about this particular pattern if you've made a coat before. Before I get started talking all about the Oslo coat, I thought I'd share with you what I'm wearing today. So today I'm wearing a Freya dress, and it's from this book here. It's the Stretch book by Tilly and the Buttons, and it's a book all about sewing with knit fabrics, and it's a great one if you're fairly new to sewing with knit fabrics because there are loads of hints and tips in here. So the Freya is my favourite pattern from this book, and you can make it as a top or a dress. Here are the line drawings, and so it's a fairly fitted top, but as I said, I've made this dress version, and it's got a mock neckline here, and that's the one I've made. It's kind of like a low stand-up neckline. There's also a cowl neck version and a roll neck version. But as I said, it's fitted in the bodice and it sort of tapers out into an A-line shape. And it's a really relaxed, comfy day dress to wear. And I've made mine in this lovely cotton jersey with bees on it, which I think is quite fun. But yeah, it's a really comfy, relaxed one. I made mine in a size 2, which is my standard Tilly and the Buttons size, and I'll put up a picture of me wearing it so you can see what it looks like. But that's the Freya dress from Tilly and the Buttons Stretch book. So now let me get started talking all about my experiences of sewing the Oslo coat. So as a bit of background, I decided I'd like to sew a coat this year when I started to think about my Make 9 2021 plans, which is an Instagram hashtag, Make 9 2021. And you think about 9 patterns you'd like to sew for the year. And I find it quite useful because it gives me an idea of thinking what I'd like to aim for. It gives a bit of structure to the year. And I thought I'd really like to include a proper winter coat on that list for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because I thought it'd be a nice technical thing to try, and I'd like to learn a bit more about how you go about lining a coat and learn other little details and hopefully improve my sewing skills while I was doing that. And secondly, I thought I could do with a smarter winter coat in my wardrobe, because I've got an everyday coat that I wear out for walks. I don't mind too much if it gets a bit muddy, but I thought it'd be nice to have something a little bit smarter, but that's also really cosy for winter. So that was my plan. I have actually made one lined jacket before, and I made that using this pattern here. It's the Delphine jacket by I Am Patterns. And this pattern is actually designed to be made using reversible fabric, so it's not designed to be lined. But I Am Patterns did also produce a free add-on that you can download from their website with a lining information in. So I gave that a go about a year ago, and I'll show you the jacket I made. There's this one here, which I made in this lovely teddy fabric from Minerva, and I'll put a link down below if they still have it. And I made it with a sort of satiny lining. And I really love this jacket, but it is quite lightweight. The teddy fabric is quite lightweight and the lining is obviously lightweight. So it's not really a proper winter coat. It's great for spring or autumn when it's a bit warmer. And also, I didn't find the lining instructions very easy to follow. So I didn't really feel like after I finished this jacket that I'd fully got my head around what's involved in lining a coat. So I wanted to give it another go to kind of cement the process in my mind and really get my head around it. But that's the jacket I made, and I'll put a picture up of that so you can see it. So that was my sort of first experience in sort of lining a garment, and I did learn a few bits that I took to the Oslo coat when I made that one. Particularly I wanted to make sure that it wasn't too lightweight like this one. I wanted to make something that was really cosy. That was one of my important priorities for my Oslo coats. So after I decided I'd like to make a winter coat, I had a little look around for patterns, and I really like the look of this coat pattern, the Oslo coat by Tessuti, so I decided to go for that one. And I really like the style of the coat, and I also heard that the instructions are quite comprehensive, and I like the idea of that, so I could really get my head around fully all the different stages involved in making a lined coat. So this is the Oslo coat. I'll show you a close-up so you can see what it looks like. It's quite a classic coat shape. It's not designed to be too fitted, it's got a fairly straight style. And then it's fully lined, and it's got a shawl collar, and it's double-breasted. It's got raglan sleeves and side pockets. It comes in sizes 6 to 16, and the size 6 is designed for a bust of 32 inches, waist 27 inches and hips 36 inches. And then it goes up to size 16, which is bust 42 inches, waist 37 inches and hips 46 inches. So it's not the biggest size range ever. And one tricky thing about this pattern, I think, is you have to buy it in a size range, either 6 to 10 or 12 to 16. So if you kind of go between those sizes, say if you're somewhere in the middle, it might be a bit tricky if you're wanting to grey between the sizes. But this size range I thought would be fine for me, so that's what I went for. So first of all, I'm going to talk about fabrics and how I went about deciding what fabric I was going to make my coat in. I haven't had a lot of experience of sewing with coating fabrics before. I've only sewn with the teddy fabric I used for my Delphine jacket. So I felt a bit of a novice when it came to coat fabrics. And it's been really tricky recently with the lockdown because you can't go to a shop and have a feel of different fabrics, and I know they can come out quite differently. So what I decided to do was to order some swatches from Minerva of different coating fabrics so I could see what they were like in the flesh and have a feel of them and figure out what I wanted to sew with. So I've got a little bundle of swatches here that I bought, and I thought I'd take you through the different fabrics and what they are and share what my experience is of those. I thought it might be useful. So the first one is a boiled wool fabric, and I love the look of a boiled wool fabric, and I thought this is a really pretty colour, this bright royal blue colour. This is quite an expensive fabric. This was $44.99 per metre, so quite a pricey fabric, so I definitely didn't want to go ahead and buy a lot of this fabric until I was confident it would be for me. So it's really lovely and thick and substantial, this boiled wool, and I think it would be a really nice fabric to sew with. But personally for me, because it's kind of got this boiled wool texture, I thought that would irritate my skin. And although not a lot of the coat would be against my skin, it probably might be around my neck, and I thought I wouldn't be able to wear that. It would just be too itchy for me because I do get itchy from wool. So it's a lovely fabric, a really nice thick, nice quality boiled wool, and I'd love to be able to make a coat with it, but I just don't think it's for me, unfortunately. The next fabric here is a wool blend coating, and this is quite a loosely woven one. It's got two different textures, so you can see this is the back, and this is the front. It's got a lovely texture to it with sort of black and white. And this was $8.99 per metre, so quite a lot cheaper. And it feels like it's got a bit of stretching, whereas the boiled wool doesn't have much give at all. And it was quite interesting, I thought, because I got this wool blend coating and another one here. And this is why I think you need to definitely get swatches if you're making a coat, because this one is, again, it's described as a wool blend coating and it's $7.99, so not much difference in price, but it's so much thinner than this one. This is really thick and chunky and loosely woven. This is much more tightly woven, but much thinner. So it'll make a much more lighter weight coat, and this might be better suited really to a kind of pair of trousers, I think, or a lightweight jacket. So I found that really interesting to see the differences between those two. The next one here is a brand I'm familiar with. This is a Lady McElroy coating fabric, and it's really lovely because it's got this sort of texture to it. You can see this sort of pattern on there. Herringbone, that's it. And this is described as a reversible wool coating fabric in grey, and it's $20.99 per metre. So it's got the lovely light grey herringbone on one side, but then this back side is a kind of dark grey colour, which is pretty too. And this one's really nice. It's kind of a little bit more substantial than the lighter weight wool coating, but not as thick and cosy as the boiled wool. But it's a really lovely one. I think that would make a lovely coat. It's really soft and doesn't feel too harsh on my skin or irritating on my skin, that one. So that's that one. And then I also ordered some vegan wool, just because I was really interested in seeing how that would be. So this is the vegan wool coating in a navy blue, and that was $14.99 per metre. And it's really lovely and soft and doesn't aggravate my skin at all. But it almost feels like felt, so it's got quite a different feel to it. It doesn't feel like wool to me, it does feel a bit more like felt. But it's really lovely, and I think that would make a really cosy coat. And where these are still available on the Minerva website, I'll try and include links to them. And then the final one I got was another Lady McElroy fabric, and this is a Donegal tweed coating fabric in deep blue, $19.99 per metre. And so again, it's got a bit of a herringbone or kind of a little bit of texture to it, which is really nice. And it's slightly lighter weight than this Lady McElroy fabric in the grey. So I just thought it was really interesting to see how much variation there was between fabrics like that, and I would always recommend getting a swatch, just so you can check the thickness and see whether it's what you're wanting for the particular pattern you have in mind. Oh, and I thought I'd mention, if you're interested in getting samples from Minerva, it's quite straightforward. If you go on the website and find the fabric you're interested in, there's a button there to click to order sample, and they basically cut you 1/10 of a metre of the fabric, so you get the whole full strip of the fabric. So it's quite a decent amount, and you can really get an idea from it of the drape and how substantial it is. And so it's a bit pricey when I got all those samples, 1/10 of a metre each. They charge you 1/10 of a metre for the price. But I thought it was worth it, because then I made sure I wouldn't spend a lot of money on a fabric that I might not actually end up finding suitable for the project. And I'm going to use those little leftover bits for practicing things on. So I use them, for example, for practicing bound buttonholes on and that sort of thing. So I'm sure they'll come in useful as little scraps to use. And it's a bit of a funny story how I ended up with my actual fabric, which I'll show you now. So this is the actual fabric I used for my coat. This is the little offcut I've got left. And it's got a lovely texture to it. It's a wool blend coating again with a lovely texture in black and ivory. It's a really nice weave, I think. It's kind of fine, but has a, yeah, I think it's a really nice overall effect. And actually this coating fabric was really reasonably priced again from Minerva, and I ordered it along with the samples. It was reduced, I think it was down from £8 per metre to £4.99 per metre, so really good value. And I actually bought it because it was so cheap. I thought I'd use it to make the toile of this coat because I wanted to make a toile first to check the fitting. And I thought actually this is not much more expensive than calico, and I had just enough in stock for the coat what I needed. So I thought I'd give it a go for the toile, and it arrived and I really liked it, and I thought, well actually why don't I actually just use it for the coat since I like it so much, and it's a nice weight and it's not too itchy because it's quite a smooth weave. So I decided to use this for the coat, and I went and ordered some calico instead to use for the actual toile. So yeah, I'm really pleased with it, and I thought that's really good value, £4.99 per metre. I think I needed just under 3 metres, so yeah, it was really reasonably priced. And then for the lining, I went for this Lady McElroy viscose acetate. It's a Lady McElroy lining fabric, and this is my offcut, so it's a little bit scrumpled up. But it's really lovely and smooth and silky, so perfect for a coat lining. But it actually was fairly stable to work with, so I really found it quite good to work with because I wasn't sure if it would slip around all over the place and pucker, but it didn't. And that was £7.99, so funnily enough my lining ended up more expensive than the coat fabric itself, but I really like the coat fabric, and I thought that's quite a bargain. So that's why I chose to make my coat with. So as well as my coating fabric and my lining fabric, I also bought one other fabric to use when I was making my Oslo coat, and that is an interlining fabric. As I mentioned before with my Delphine jacket, I found my Delphine jacket with the teddy fabric and the satin lining ended up a little bit lightweight and more suitable for spring or autumn than actually cosy in winter. So I really wanted to make sure my Oslo coat would be really cosy and I'll be able to wear it on the coldest winter day. And I had a research online, and it seems to be that the way to go was to interline the coat. So to include an extra layer of cosier fabric in between the coating fabric and the lining. And I found a really useful article actually on the Closet Core website, and I'll put a link down below so you can have a read of it. But it's actually about the experiences of sewing the Oslo coat and using some interlining, and I found that really handy, and it talks you through how to do it as well, so it was really useful. And it recommended thin slate lining. So I got some thin slate lining for my coat. And this is a leftover fabric, and it's really hard to show up on the camera. But it's thin slate lining, and so it's designed to kind of be worn in cold weather conditions, and it almost feels like a very, very thin duvet or maybe some quilting fabric, but it's really, really cosy. So the weight of thin slate fabric that I got is 100 grams by 150 centimetres, and I've got a decent amount left because I had to buy either 1 metre or 2 metres of it, so I'm hoping I'll use this on another project because it really is cosy, so it'll be perfect for lining other garments too. Maybe a coat for one of my children. And so I got that from eBay, and I don't think it's available from the seller on eBay anymore, but I think you can get it elsewhere. It's a thin slate lining, and it's really cosy, and as I said, the Closet Core tutorial talks all about how to add it to your lining before you put the coat together, and it worked really well, and it does make my coat super cosy. I thought I'd also mention what interfacing I use for the coat, because I often find it quite hard to know what interfacing works well with different garments. So for this coat I use Feliceline F220 interfacing, which I got from Minerva, and I'll include a link down below to it, and I found it quite good because it was quite lightweight. One thing I did find though is it's a fusible interfacing, but I found it didn't fuse very well to the coating fabric, so I overlocked all my coating pieces before sewing the coat together, just to keep the edges from fraying, but it also worked well in holding the interfacing in place, so I'd recommend that. So that's the fabrics I selected to sew my coat in. But next I'm going to talk about the sizing of the coat. So I chose to buy the size 6, 8, 10 version of the coat. And actually the size 6 just fits my measurements exactly right, which is bust 32 inches, waist 27 inches, hips 36 inches, which is pretty much what I am. But I decided for this coat to size up to the size 8, which is bust 34 inches, waist 29 inches and hips 38 inches. And the reason I did that was twofold. Firstly, I didn't want it to be too fitted and I wanted a little bit of an oversized lip to the coat. And secondly, I thought because I'm adding the interlining with the thin slate, which is a bit thicker, I didn't want that to make it feel too snug when that's added, so I thought it was worth sizing up for that purpose. And I'm really pleased how the fit turned out, and I put a picture up of me wearing the coat so you can see how the fit ended up on me. So it's a little bit oversized, but not super oversized, which is kind of what I was going for. And for that size 8, you need, for 150 centimetre wide coating fabric, you need 2.5 metres, so the coat's not too fabric heavy. For the lining, 135 centimetre wide lining, you need 1.65 metres. and for interfacing you need 1.3 metres, and that's mainly for the length because there's some long interfacing pieces on there, but you don't use the width of the interfacing, so I have got some left to use on other projects, which is nice. And I thought I'd mention one thing about the Oslo coat that is a bit disappointing that I'd quite like to see, is they don't have the full finished garment measurements available. They have a few measurements, like the length of the coat and the length of the sleeve, but not the full measurements, like around the waist and the hips and everything. So that's something that would have been quite useful to know beforehand, but they don't include. So I decided to make a full toile of the Oslo coat, including the lining, before I cut into my real fabric. And one of the reasons I decided to make a toile was because the finished garment measurements aren't shown, so I wanted to make sure that the size I'd chosen was just right for me. I also thought I might need to make some adjustments, so a toile would be really useful to see where the adjustments were needed. But also I wanted to do the full toile, including the lining, just to take myself through the process and make sure I was familiar with all the steps and got my head around it all. Just so that when I got to the real fabric that I could move through it quite smoothly and know what I was doing. So as I mentioned before, I got some calico, it's a medium weight calico, and used it to make my toile. And here is my toile, I'll just show you it here. And I had some leftover fabric that I'd used on another dress. This was a penny dress actually I used this on, but I had quite a decent amount left over of this cotton voile fabric that I got a long time ago. So I used that for the inside, for the lining. And as I said, this medium calico, and it was really useful to take me through the whole process, and I got a lot more familiar with the instructions and yeah, how the whole lining process worked from doing this toile, so I found that really useful. So once I made the toile, then it was clear that a few adjustments were needed, so I'll talk you through the adjustments I made to get to my final version. The first thing I did was move the pockets up slightly, and I found a few people talking about this online. The pockets seem to sit a little bit low when you put your hands in, so I moved them up by an inch, just so they're a little bit of more of a comfortable place to get my hand in, because I know that I wanted them to be usable pockets. I want to be able to put keys and my phone in and that sort of thing when I'm going out. As well as moving the pockets, I made a few other adjustments. Firstly, I increased the length of the coat by 1 inch, just because I wanted to give it a slightly oversized feel, and I thought increasing the length would help that look. I also increased the sleeve length by 1.5 inches. I do have fairly long arms, and I wanted to make sure it wasn't sitting too high and that it would be really nice and cosy and covering my wrists, so I increased the sleeve length by 1.5 inches. And then one other adjustment I made was to deepen the armhole by 1 centimetre. Because I found with my toile that it felt a little bit tight under the armhole, and I think it would have been okay as it was if I wasn't adding the thin slate lining. And I just thought with the thin slate lining it would make it a bit bulkier, and I didn't want it to feel tight under the arms. Particularly when I'm going out in winter, I might have a cosy jumper underneath, so quite a few layers. So I just deepened the armhole by 1 centimetre, and that made all the difference there. So it was really worth doing the toile to find out those adjustments I needed to make, so that when I cut into my real fabric, I was quite confident the fit was going to turn out okay. So I thought I'd talk next about how I found the Oslo coat pattern instructions. When I researched online about coat patterns, and I really liked the look of this coat pattern, firstly because I thought it was a really lovely coat, but also I heard a lot of good things about the instructions and that they were fairly clear and held your hand through if you were fairly new to sewing a lined coat. And they are really nice and clear, and what I really like is that lots of colour photos are included throughout the booklet. So it's really nice to be able to visualise exactly what you're supposed to do. So yeah, lots of colour photos and lots of instructions, so they are quite comprehensive. So that, in that respect, perfect for someone who's fairly new to sewing a coat, because there is lots of information in there and lots of pictures. One thing that isn't in there that I'd have quite liked to see included is some information about finishing the edges. I wasn't sure whether I should be overlocking the edges or not, and had a read online about it, and there seemed to be quite a lot of people saying that often ready-to-wear coats, the edges aren't finished just because once the coat is turned the right way out, all the edges are hidden within the lining and the coat, so you don't see them, they're not exposed to wear. But I found both my fabrics quite prone to fray, and so I decided I'd overlock all my pattern pieces beforehand, and I'm quite glad I did. It just made the whole process much easier because everything stayed neat when I was sewing it. So personally I'd recommend going through and doing the overlocking before you get sewing. And even though they're kind of now hidden inside the coat, I know that they'll be fairly durable and hard wearing, as I do get a wear out of my coat, and I'm hoping I'll get a lot of wear out of this coat because it is quite a classic coat. I'm hoping it'll last a long time. So I'd recommend overlocking the edges. I also found, as I mentioned before, for the pieces with the interfacing on, that really helped to secure the interfacing down when the interfacing wasn't really wanting to fuse onto the coat fabric very well. One thing in the instructions that I found a little bit unclear was it mentions about how before you bag the coat out and turn it the right way out, you need to attach the lining to the coat in certain places to make sure it all holds together on the outside and the line doesn't come away from the coat. I wasn't entirely clear on how to do that, so it was really useful doing the toile because it gave me a chance to practice basting the two layers together and turning it out to make sure it turned out okay. So I found that really useful, but that probably is because I'm fairly new to lining coats, so if you're a little bit more experienced, probably the instructions would make more sense to you. I just found it a little bit tricky to know exactly what I was supposed to be attaching to where, so the toile was a great chance to practice it. One thing I thought I'd mention in a bit more detail was how I attached the interlining to make sure that sat in the coat and to make sure the coat was extra cosy. So as I mentioned before, I used thin slate interlining, and I basically cut the interlining the same size as a piece of the actual lining itself, and then I attached the interlining and the lining together by just sewing around the edge with a narrow seam allowance, just so that I could then essentially treat it as one fabric and put all the pieces together as per the pattern instructions. So that was just an extra step for me, putting all those pieces together first. And then what's recommended on the closet core tutorial, which I'll put a link to down below, is that once you've sewn them together, you trim a little bit off around the edge of the thin slate lining, just so the seams don't end up too thick, which I found quite a useful tip. And then I actually cut the thin slate lining a little bit shorter on the sleeve pieces and the actual full coat length, just because when you actually put the whole coat together, the lining is kind of tucked under slightly, and I didn't want the thin slate ended tucked under and ending up with 2 layers of thin slate on those pieces. So I just cut it a little bit shorter so it sits slightly higher up in the sleeve and on the length, and doesn't end up getting bulky and sort of squished up down the bottom. So I cut the thin slate for the sleeve pieces and the main body pieces. I didn't use any thin slate in this front bit with the coat facing, just because it's quite bulky anyway. It's got interfacing in there and then 2 layers of coating fabric, so I thought that'd be bulky enough already. And also because it's double breasted, it comes over at the front, so I didn't need it extra thick there because there would already be 2 layers on top of each other. One thing I would mention though, I cut the thin slate the same size as all the fabric pieces except for the back piece, because the back piece of the lining has a little vent built in here just to allow a little bit more movement so the line doesn't get stretched, and so yeah, there's a little vent built in down here. So what I did is I made this lining piece and sewed the vent. It's got a little pleat here to create the vent. I sewed that piece first, and then I cut the thin slate to fit the lining once that vent was added, so that I didn't end up folding over the thin slate and ending up with a really thick piece at the back here of the coat. That's just one adjustment I made when I was adjusting the pattern pieces to get the thin slate piece there. So those are the main details on the construction of the coat, but I thought I'd share with you a couple of other little details that I added. One was that I added a little hanging hook when I was putting together the coat, because I find that quite useful, and I've got other coats that don't have hanging hooks, I've had to add them in, so I really wanted to make sure I added one. So I made one in the same fabric as the actual coat itself, so I just added a hanging hook in and sewed it in at that point in the pattern, so I'm really pleased to have that there. And I just made that by turning over the fabric and overlocking on the back, so it's ended up quite neat, and I'm quite pleased with that. Another thing I did was I did my first try at bound buttonholes. As you can see, I've made bound buttonholes. I was slightly worried my machine wouldn't be able to cope with the thickness of this fabric, and I didn't want to get to the end of the project and then have the whole coat spoilt by it not being able to sew the buttonholes very nicely. And I thought it'd be a good try to have a go of a bound buttonhole, and it would look quite smart too. So there they are, and I'm really pleased with how they turned out actually. I had quite a few practices of these on, I first of all practiced on one of the little swatches of fabric I got. I'll show you here. I had some practices on this fabric first to figure out how big I wanted the bound buttonholes to be, and also to figure out how the process worked. And then I also had to go on this fabric, some of the offcuts in this fabric as well, to make sure I could do it and it would work well on this fabric. And I used a really nice video online which takes you through how to bind buttonholes, and it made it seem fairly straightforward. And I'll include a link to that video below so you can have a check it out yourself in case you're interested in making bound buttonholes. Now, one thing I realised after I'd started to think about this coat was that the bound buttonholes might be visible from both sides, just because I'll probably wear this coat sometimes open and sometimes done up. So what I did, instead of just finishing the back by sort of turning the fabric under and holding it in place, is I did a double bound buttonhole, so it's bound on both sides. So it does make it a little bit more bulky, but I'm really pleased with it because it means it'll look nice both ways however I wear it. So yeah, I think it's quite a nice feature. And then I just used these coating buttons I got from Minerva, and they were reduced price again because I thought I was just going to use them to have a go of a toile. But I think they really work well with this fabric. There's quite simple coating buttons with a little bit of kind of grey on them, so they kind of tie in nicely with the coat, I think. And the coat pattern actually only specifies 1 button, but I thought for me I'd prefer 2 buttons because it would just sit that little bit more closed and keep it that little bit more snug. So I'll put up another picture of me wearing it so you can see this is a picture of me out and about in my coat with just a pair of wellies on in the woods. And I really love it actually, I'm really happy with how it turned out. One other tool I found really invaluable in making this coat that I just wanted to share was this tool here, which is a wooden clapper. And I've heard lots of good things about these, and I thought I'd get one and see how well it worked, and it was so useful for finishing the seams. The way it works is you use a steam iron on the seams, and once you've steamed the seam, you pop this on and hold it down hard, and it absorbs the moisture and lets the heat stay in the seam to give a really nice flat press. And that was really important to me on this coat, particularly because I knew in the lining I had the interlining as well, so the lining seams were going to be a bit more bulky than if I just used the viscose fabric. I really wanted to make sure all the coat seams on the outside were really sharp, just to make sure I had the best seam finish possible. And it was so useful. I got this one from Edward Links. It's an online retailer. I'm not sure if they have them in stock anymore, but you can also, I know you can get them from Guthrie Garney and other places online. But it was so useful to get a good finish with the coat, so I definitely recommend a clapper if you're working with a wool coating fabric and want to get a good finish. So that was my experience of sewing the Oslo coat. I found it a really enjoyable process and a real learning curve too. I'll pop up another picture of it here just so you can see it again. But yeah, through making the toile, figuring out what fabrics to use, making adjustments, doing the interlining, making the bound buttonholes, I feel like I've learned a lot, and I hope I've been able to share some of that here with you in the vlog. And it might be useful to you if you're planning on making your own line coat, or whether you just were quite interested in finding out a bit more about this pattern. I'll pop it on again. I'll pop it on just so you can see how it looks on too. It's really nice and cosy, and I hope I'll get a lot of wear out of it in years to come, because it is quite a classic coat style, and I think the fabric I've gone with is fairly classic too. So I'm sure I'll be getting a lot of wear out of that next winter and beyond. I'm really looking forward to wearing it out a bit more actually, because now it's getting a bit warmer outside. I won't have much chance now until next winter. But I'm really glad I finished it, and I hope you found this vlog really useful. So thank you very much for tuning into this vlog. I hope you've enjoyed my review of the Oslo coat by Tessuti. I've really enjoyed sharing my experience of it with you. And if you have enjoyed this vlog, I would love it if you give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel before, then please do consider subscribing. And also if you press the bell notification, then you'll hear about when my new vlogs come out. I love to talk about sewing patterns and fabrics and all things sewing related, so I'd love it if you'd join me here. So thanks again for watching. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.